Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Blue Banter. I am Tucker Hazel, and this is Tanner Dykstra, and we're here to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the culmination of a trio of Sonic movies, of which I've actually reviewed all three. For whatever reason, I reviewed Sonic 1 by myself, just sitting in our dorm room 4 years ago.
Yeah,
it's a really weird memory.
Tucker, that was the foundation of Blue Banter.
Yeah, Blue Banter. But of course, if you have seen Sonic 3 and want to talk to us about this film, you can join our Discord, you can leave a comment, and you can subscribe to our channel to keep up with all of our Sonic 3 coverage. Tanner,
yeah, keep up because it goes fast.
We're changing the channel. No more other movie reviews, only Sonic 3 coverage.
You know what, Tucker? Surprising as it may be, I'd be more okay with that because I'm going to circumvent you asking me what my thoughts were on the movie and just tell you, against all odds, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is pretty good to actually maybe really good, actually. Yeah. It blows my mind to say this. I heard, somewhat positive things going into it and be like, okay, maybe it'll be marginally better than Sonic and Sonic 2. Two movies that I think are very annoying, bottom of the barrel kids movie entertainment. And Sonic the Hedgehog 3 has stuff for hardcore Sonic fans, of which I do not count myself amongst them, but I can appreciate the things that they like. There are themes that are well executed.
That's a self-report, by the way. Being able to appreciate what Sonic fans like, that you shouldn't admit to that.
Fair point. In Sonic the Hedgehog 3, there are themes that are set up and executed upon and brought to a satisfying conclusion. It is quite funny, and I think they solve a lot of the solutions and poor routes they've gone down in previous films, especially as it occurs or pertains to human characters. I think they solved a lot of those issues and have started and found a strong foundation for the main Sonic trio. This Team Sonic, or Team Knuckles, if you may.
Depending on which direction you swing.
Yeah, right. Tucker, what did you think of Sonic the Hedgehog 3?
Yeah, I completely agree. We reviewed, I think almost kind of begrudgingly reviewed Sonic the Hedgehog 2 over 2 years ago at this point. And we just kind of crapped on that movie. And I remember mentioning that I fell asleep for a chunk of it. And I woke up and I'm like, is that the Chaos Emeralds? What's happening? I had a fever dream annoying night watching that movie, which I believe, was that paired with Everything Everywhere?
It was indeed.
That's a really interesting
crazy
night for me. But I actively dislike Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and Sonic 2. But Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I think it falls into a few of the trappings at the beginning, most of which, the scene at the beginning that involves Tom and what's his wife's name?
Hang on, I'll find it. Don't worry.
Sally.
Sally? No, what's her name? It's Maddie.
Maddie. Tom and Maddie. I was like, yeah, okay. And Sonic's making his quips. I'm like, all right. I think at that point I was like, I'm watching this. This is very much reminiscent of the tone of the other movies I didn't really like. But at that point, I had been weathered down by 2 entire feature-length films worth of that stuff. That I was ready to sit in to another full feature-length movie of that. But when they get dropped to the background for basically the entire runtime of the movie, and the movie then becomes surprisingly focused on a ensemble adventure cast thing with Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Shadow, and 2 Eggmen. It is a surprisingly fun concoction of characters that I think largely bounce off of each other pretty well. I think it's balanced pretty well. And while there are moments of, I think especially for me, my least favorite part of these movies is Ben Schwartz as Sonic and his jokes.
Sure.
There are moments of that, but there's so much else going on that I found much higher quality, especially in the writing of Robotnik and Shadow and Agent Stone. The villains are actually really the thematic carry of this film. It is really well balanced between all that. And there's also, you didn't even mention it, some of the coolest action sequences I've seen all year in this movie. It's a good movie. And I came out the other end, I was smiling during a lot of it and laughing at some of the performances. And I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted these movies to be.
I was smiling so much during the third act of this film that I
What's
had
wrong? Laughing gas? Someone
I
pumped
know.
laughing gas in here?
There
What's
were
happening?
like tears. You know when you smile for so long that you get like tears in the corners of your eyes? That was happening. It was like, what is going on? I want to see
is not
Sonic the
right.
Hedgehog 3.
Yeah.
But so Tucker, where should we start with this? You want to get like the Ben Schwartz Sonic, his focus of the story out of the way,
Sure.
and then we can talk about Shadow and the Eggmen and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because I largely agree with your position that you sort of asserted there, that he is consistently maybe, I don't want to say like the weakest part. It all hinges on him, but like in this,
At this point, not really though.
yeah, aside from like the the sidekick elements of Tails and Knuckles or whatever, he's kind of the weakest element of this film. But I think you're exactly right that we've experienced 2 feature films worth of this type of Sonic, this writing of Sonic, this timing, the kind of quips that he cracks, that maybe they are, less prevalent in this film. I certainly don't want to go back and watch Sonic 1 and 2 and compare.
No.
But I don't know, it's just something, there's just something more lovable about him in this one, that the quips are maybe toned down, the familial, his friendship with Tails and Knuckles weighs a lot of that in the other direction, and I think you're exactly right. The balance of the characters takes a lot of that weight off of, that leading character weight off of Sonic himself.
Absolutely. And it also takes the leading character weight of what those 2 movies was the dynamic between Sonic and Tom.
Yeah. Everyone's
That's
favorite
what those
Sonic
movies
character.
were about.
Exactly. It's absolutely where those movies went wrong, and why you and I don't connect to them at all, is that we get Tails at the end of the first movie, and then even in the second, we're like, I don't know, it's Sonic, Tails, and Tom, and Maddie's sister, and Maddie's sister's husband. Like, there's way too many human characters floating around in those first 2 movies.
Yeah.
And they are almost entirely excised in this third film to be replaced with both Tails and Sonic, who are Tails and Knuckles, who we've mentioned already.
Yeah.
But also Shadow. Should we talk about Shadow?
Well, I think it's important to mention that Tails and Knuckles being integrated into this film, into the family dynamic and into the friendship and Team Sonic dynamic from the very beginning is new, actually. Like, this is actually the first time we've seen that in these movies. Like, Tails shows up partway through Sonic 2, and Knuckles is actually the villain of Sonic 2 in some way. And so this dynamic of the 3 of them being a trio and having the leader brains brawn dynamic going on, and having sort of inside jokes with one another and doing like wombo combos and stuff, that's something new. But it feels like it's been there the whole time. And I think that is to the credit of the 3 of them and their dynamic and the performances of, I mean, for me especially, Idris Elba and Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who I think are, I'm certainly more endeared to Tails and Knuckles than I am to Sonic.
Sure.
But I think they do a good job of just setting the baseline immediately. That sequence where they're racing each other at the beginning is, part of it is the quips from Sonic where he's like, "Ooh, I'm the best, and there's no one's ever gonna be better than me." Yeah, I'm like, okay, this is Sonic. I gotta get used to that. But the dynamic is set up, and it writing wise, it feels very natural. Like, this is the continuation of that. They don't do any like, oh, remember when we weren't friends like 1 movie ago?
Yeah.
They just pretend like this is how it's always been, rather than actually this was technically only introduced in like the last act of the second movie.
Right, and there is offhanded jokes about, like, Knuckles says, "You're much stronger than the Hedgehog I fought before," and Sonic's like, "Dude, I'm standing right here."
See, there's my problem, Tim.
Yeah.
Is you can think of any of these sequences where things are happening, and then there's just a fucking Sonic line, injected like a crowbar into the middle of the sequence. Like, no, shut up.
But also, like the friendship, the relationship between these 2 characters is very cute. Like, when they're in Tokyo after we get our first Shadow action sequence, and they need to like lay low, and Tails is like, "I know the perfect place to go," and they go to like a Japanese, what do they call it? I forget what they call it.
A chow garden.
A chow garden,
which is a reference to the games. It's funny.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for me, who hasn't ever played a Sonic the Hedgehog game, I'm like, oh, it's funny because it's like a cute little Japanese kawaii cosplay cafe or something. And then we get the thing. Yeah, hang on, I need to pull up this guy's name. 1 second. Whoever plays
Walter?
Sorry?
Commander Walter or whatever?
Commander Walter.
Something like that.
This guy is kind of like the unsung MVP of these movies because he is this button-down military guy and he's always talking to little hedgehogs or whatever, and he gets these moments where he's playing like the absolute straight man in these sequences, and so he sits down and he's like, "Listen, Sonic, I have something very important to tell you." And this guy's delivery is perfect for you to laugh at. Like, it's like a regular military guy talking to, like, "Hey, listen, Sonic and Tails and Knuckles, I have a very important mission for you.
Yeah.
Shadow is here." And I mean, he is kind of pitch perfect for all these movies, but I think his characterization in that scene in particular is where I was really like, this movie's funny. Like, I think the writers and the director have a really good handle on, like, finding the balance between making it sincere and also being like, it's silly and stupid that we're doing like the government agency called Gun, and where the villain is a black moody hedgehog with soap shoes on or whatever.
No, the balance in this movie I think is well struck, which I think is actually probably the most surprising element of it for me, is because I think they tried to have like over saccharine, like, oh, you know, family themes and like self-confidence themes in the other one, but I do think that the balance of the more genuine elements of the character dynamics, whether it's Sonic being like a sad/hurt when Tom gets injured partway through the film, or the element of Tails and Knuckles and Sonic having this oath that they've sworn to one another to always trust one another, even if things don't seem like they're gonna go right. Those feel, I think, more naturally integrated into the screenplay here. And as I was watching this movie, and I was watching these sequences where like they're talking about like the themes of the movie, I'm like, okay, this is a scene where they're talking about the themes, and I'm like, but this works. I'm like, this is like a screenplay.
I had the exact same thing, because there's a thing set up between Tom and Sonic at the very beginning where he's like, hey, listen, you might have pain and stuff and, you know, and grief in your past, but you don't let it define you. You don't let it change what's in your heart. I was like, okay, this is what Sonic is going to have to impart to Shadow at the end of the movie. And then when it gets to that scene, an hour and 45 minutes later, I was like, actually, this is super well done. Like, I was really surprised, because I am so used to these Sonic movies and these like bottom-of-the-barrel kid stuff being so on the nose and so sappy in the way that they execute their themes, and you're not really integrating them into the characters overall, that it was really surprising to see it done that well in Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Well, I do think that the smartest decision that they made between in a movie that actually has a lot of moving pieces in terms of an ensemble cast is that almost everyone in the cast ties back to that one theme. They don't try to have Robotnik have his own theme, have Shadow has his own arc, have Sonic have his own arc. They all follow the same arc, and I think that helps it feel a lot more focused, especially as the moment when Sonic and Shadow are fighting, and they have the Spider-Man and Green Goblin No Way Home moment where it's like, you know, we're not so different, and they're like, let it out, like, just end me, like, these things. I'm like, okay, well, obviously, I think it works great in No Way Home, but I'm surprised to see it working so well here, and it's because you see the arc paralleled very nicely between Shadow, who gets a good amount of screen time and a good amount of development and has a genuine motivation that is actually well written, and his entire sequences to himself. And also, I think it's a good moment to transition to Shadow. The thing I have to praise most, as someone who has always been kind of off-put by Shadow as a character because he's always been the aggressively edgy one, I think they did a really good job here painting Shadow as a character whose edge is more from grief than everything. And I know that's like implied in the games, and like people make jokes about Maria in the games, but what it comes off as in the games, because Maria as a character in Shadow's backstory is not talked about in most of the games, is that Shadow's just annoying. Shadow's just like pushing everyone away. But in this movie, because this is a unique version of Shadow and we get to see his story play out in this exact movie, he's like a quiet and focused guy who's holding all of this pain back. And I was surprised to see, I think Keanu Reeves as Shadow, and Shadow's like emotional storytelling on his face in these sequences, I'm like, this is like probably the best like defined character in the series, maybe.
Dude, Because when Keanu Reeves was cast as Shadow, I was like, okay, I know what they're doing. He can do like a gravelly sort of dour voice. Yeah. They're gonna have him be doing like Neo, whoa kind of thing at some point, and they never do that. No. Keanu Reeves does a really good job in this role. I was supremely surprised by how much emotionality he was pouring into this. He is not mailing this one in, as it were.
Yeah.
And as you're saying, the jaded elements of Shadow's character are really important to him and really focused upon in this.
Yeah.
I mean, that entire sequence, I think this is important for, people like us who, 20-year-olds or so who are easily, off-put by, like, sappy kids movie stuff or cringy humor in kids movies. The relationship between Shadow and Maria is not like she's not, first of all, it takes place in the 70s, so I was about to say she's not like on TikTok or anything like that, but that obviously makes sense. But you know what I mean? She is there as like a kid to be extremely likable and lovable.
Yeah.
She is just a ray of sunshine and the only person who shows any kind of kindness to Shadow, and that is what he gloms onto, and then imparts some lines that'll come back at the end of the movie. Even though the star is gone, it keeps the light is still there.
Tanner,
all this kind of thing.
That's a great thematic line.
Yes,
as they were sitting on the moon at the very end, and obviously I had kind of lightly drawn it into my mind before. It's like, because I knew Maria was going to die. I was like, okay, it's going to be like, even though she's gone, she lives on in my heart. Like the way they parallel that with like the sitting under the stars moment and looking at the stars and like this scientific thing of like, even when the light has reached us, the star might be gone, but like the light still shines. I'm like, no, that's like a well-written, like kind of poetic thing that like gives emotional weight to the characters.
But not even this movie is not even solely about kind of what we talked about thematically before. About not having your grief define you. It's about like processing grief and stuff like that, which is a really good theme to put in a kids movie, especially when you make it when you integrate it as well into the characters as you do, and also like how revenge is not is not a worthwhile effort necessarily,
not a healthy way to process that. And again,
exactly,
this ties back to what I was saying earlier of each of the characters in some way prop up this theme of grief and vengeance and the way that processing like balances, because Gerald Robotnik, the second Robotnik.
Yes, we should talk about the Robotniks.
Not talked about the Robotnik 2 yet, but the way that his master evil plan with a giant space laser is to destroy the planet, and there's this nihilism element to it. That I think obviously is like the swings to the extreme of letting vengeance overtake you and not properly processing your grief. But it shows the spectrum between that and then the way that Tails and Knuckles remain committed and have processed their grief. And then there's Sonic here and then Shadow here. Like, we get to see all of the different elements of what this theme could be portrayed as through the cast of characters, which I think, again, it keeps everything tied together really nicely.
Yeah, and like Gerald Robotnik, and we can sort of talk a little bit about Shadow and then the two Robotniks as well. The Gerald thing is, he is, like you said, the ultimate villain of the movie, the one that we don't necessarily redeem. He tricks Ivo, the standard Robotnik that we've come to know, into like spending this time with him, convincing him that he has this love and care for him. But then at the end of the movie is obviously like, listen, you're not my granddaughter Maria. You are not. I really don't. I don't truly love you. It's because 50 years ago I closed off my heart to anybody else after she died. Like that. That is the ultimate conclusion for that grief or revenge sort of storyline that thematic line that we've been talking about. Should we? You want to talk about the fight between Sonic and Shadow, and then we can go Robotniks and stuff? Because I think a lot of that stuff is comedy.
Yeah.
Dude, We were briefly messaging about this before. So up until about the hour and a half mark in this movie, I was like, you know what, this movie's actually a lot of fun. It's pretty funny. The jokes are landing for me.
Yeah,
Solid action all around. Well balanced themes are being set up, and then we get the God mode golden Sonic thing, and he gets all the Chaos Emeralds, and he becomes God mode golden Sonic. And starts beating the shit out of Shadow, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty good. And then they like both get the powers.
Yeah.
And we are like bouncing over all over the globe, and the score is really kicking in. I was like, they're like doing something here.
Yeah.
This is not just standard Sonic fights a giant robot like at the end of Sonic 1 or 2.
Yeah.
This is really something in terms of like them trying to convey scale, or maybe trying to carry over some imagery from the games that obviously fans are really tapped into.
It finally feels like they discovered what the visual styling of making a live action Sonic the Hedgehog movie can be.
Yeah.
Is frankly, and I think this is a great place to draw inspiration from. I don't know if this is exactly where it came from, but you remember people being quite complimentary, and I think rightfully so, of the moments of Makari's speed being shown in Eternals, and the way that the background stretches behind her, and she like is bounding over landscapes and things. And they somehow didn't do that very much in the first 2 feature films of Sonic. And like, okay, he's going fast, but like, he's like not really catching up to things, which is kind of dumb. And like, he's mostly just like beating criminals and stuff. Like, it's not like people or like
the most
drones.
we get of like the super speed scenes are your more standard like Quicksilver, Days of Future Past. Like time is frozen around him.
Yeah, but then when we get to the climactic action sequence of Sonic 3, and we get these, we get this moment that when they slam down into a location, I believe the first location they land is like Egypt or something like that.
Yeah.
And then as they're chasing one another, the background is transitioning all across the globe. Like, whoa, okay, that's really cool. And then Sonic grabs Shadow, slams him down the ground, and they do something. I don't know what it is, but so much force is exerted. The crust of the earth is shattered open, and a flow of lava comes squirting out into the sky. And then they go up into the sky right after that, and they slam down, and they're like at like the Parthenon or whatever in Greece. And it's like sunset. I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, they unlocked a mode of like visual storytelling and unique sense of scale and speed and spectacle that I was like, I had my mouth agape. I looked over at my friend. I'm like, I can't believe what I just saw.
Yeah. I mean, this is truly the moment where it transcended into, where has this been for 2 movies?
Yeah.
They are cooking right now. And so they have the moment on the moon, and Shadow has like the stars in his eyes as he mentions the thing about the light still being there. And I was like, this is really good. Like, far be it from me to call a shot in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 beautiful, but I was like, this is like genuinely very like a well composed thing that you can like see visual storytelling in, which is not really a term that comes up when you're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2.
Or video game adaptations in general.
Exactly. And then they get the team up, and I will shout out number 1 Sonic fan that I know, Joseph Wayne Wright, for at the beginning of the movie, as Maria's playing on her guitar, a song from the series, I don't know which game, but Live and Learn, I believe is the name of the song, comes in, because he's like, oh, you can't do an acoustic version of Live and Learn. But then they like bring it in fully as Sonic and Shadow team up, and I was like, this fucking rules. I just love that moment where they team up as well, and then we get to the Robotniks at the end of their story. So let's talk about Jim Carrey. As a presence as he has been in the first 2 films and in this one. Tucker, what are your feelings on him and his dual roles here?
He was always, in everyone's mind, and 100% rightfully so, the best part of those 2 movies. He's the reason you go see them, and you're like, he's still got the sauce. He's bringing goofs and jabs and all sorts of crazy physical comedy, and his facial acting is still there. But in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, they make him a much more consistent presence in the film, and they double his screen time and performance variety by having two characters, and it is an inspired choice not only to have Sonic and Dr. Eggman like teaming up, okay, we're on the third movie, like that's kind of it's like ready for that.
Feels that's what you do, yeah.
But then you still also then get to have evil Eggman through Gerald, but then also
the team up is short lived.
It is, but then you get like you get a really, really bizarre and super like what the fuck is this character dynamic between Gerald and Ivo? It is unlike anything I've ever seen in a movie, where it's two villains, one of which is like grandfather simping. Like, it's the weirdest character dynamic, but it works so well because it also leans into or complements where this movie leans into the world of Sonic is goofy. It is dumb. These characters are ridiculous. And that is okay, and we need to be okay with leaning into that. And the fact that they excise the human characters that are boring, and they bring in the human character, and I guess characters with Ivo and Gerald in this, that are 100% leaning into the cartoonish, literally mustache-twirling villain. There are moments of Eggman imagery and comedy here that are so cartoonish that are just they're remarkably funny. It's
really funny.
Yeah.
I mean, there are there's the sequence where they really get to like just go into goofball mode, where it's like, it's like 55, 60-year-old Jim Carrey and his 110 or whatever year old grandfather doing like father and son stuff from like an Andy Griffith cartoon, where he's like teaching him how to ride a bike, and he's going trick-or-treating in like a boxy robot costume, and he's sitting on a park bench and eating ice cream with a propeller hat, and you're like, this is really good. Jim Carrey is obviously a master of physical comedy, and it all comes through here. His delivery of the lines, whether or not the lines themselves are funny, he always manages to make them funny. And there are some things that were in Sonic 1 and 2 that I didn't feel fully worked, but for whatever reason they click for me here. I think it's maybe just some more earned trust, or just enjoyment rather in the writing of the film. Like when he always has these like weird modern reference jokes. And one of them here got a huge laugh out of me, which was the, unsubscribed, blocked, and reported, or whatever.
That was really funny.
It's like, there are things like that in the first two movies that just don't work as well as they do in 3. I think it's just the earning of goodwill that has been done up to that point. Sure. I mean,
for us, it was the earning of badwill, but then they made it into goodwill. Yes. I don't know.
The funniest laugh out loud moment that happened between me and our friends who went to go see it with me, that no one else in the theater really laughed at, which made me feel a little awkward, was the Gerald Robotnik, or when Ivo says, "I can't believe this. This is crazy," after they've been tricked or bamboozled or whatever by Kristen Ritter's character. And then his grandfather comes back with, "I know, women in the military?" Oh, God.
There are consistently very good jokes in this movie, and I most of them come from the Robotnik, and that is a full compliment. I mean, I don't think almost any of the Sonic jokes are particularly funny.
No.
But there's so much more Jim Carrey in this movie, and there's so much more for them to play with. And again, within a character dynamic that is unlike anything I've ever seen, you get some really ridiculous moments. And again, to the imagery, I am glad that they've completed the evolution from. I mean, you can draw this even further back than the release of the first movie, from like ugly Sonic in that first trailer to a Sonic that looks good. I've always enjoyed Sonic's design in these movies, but he's interacting with humans too much in the first one, and then the second one is like too much human and also overstuffed with these other elements. And in this movie, they've completed the transition from we don't need to rely on the human characters anymore. We've established enough goofy-ass Sonic characters to where we can have a full ensemble cast of just them. And simultaneously, Eggman, though Jim Carrey has always been the best part of these movies, has also completed his transformation into full cartoon-ass, accurate, comic-accurate, garb-wearing Dr. Eggman with the bald head and the giant mustache, and like the long, flowing, ridiculous, giant button costume. It is, and they're in a giant space laser that flips out its nose and like,
becomes a mustache design.
Mustache thing. I'm like, that's Sonic. Like,
right.
Like the egg robot that he's in at the end of 2 is it's solid, and like that was certainly the like best moment of imagery from the first 2 movies, I think. But that, Tanner, I know you wouldn't know this, but like the moment of Eggman making a giant space laser or having some sort of space station has happened like 10 times in the Sonic series.
I can imagine that is the case.
And so finally having this moment happen where there's a giant space laser that looks like Dr. Eggman, I'm like, now you're into it. This is what I want to see. Now, hopefully, because they have announced a 4th movie.
Yes.
Hopefully there's also some more like, for me, like Sonic environments, I think are the biggest thing that is missing at this point. I think they handled it a little bit better here, but like there's no visual imagery from the Sonic environments because they're taking place
they
on
do
Earth.
that a little bit in 2 because Robotnik was like trapped there.
Oh, that's true. That is a good point.
But I think
credit,
given the end credit scene, which you stick around for these?
Yeah, of course.
Given the end credit scenes, I think we might be going over there because the space station explodes. Shadow and Eggman sacrifice themselves to blow up the space station farther away from Earth's atmosphere, and it makes like this weird galaxy cosmos thing in the sky above Earth. And so I'm like, that's probably going to be a
They
portal.
also cut like they shave the moon.
Yeah, that's true. They take approximately like a tenth of the corner off the moon, which is pretty good. Oh, the moment where they like cut the thing off the moon and they all go, "Oh!" That's pretty good. I like that.
And then Eggman immediately blames it on Tails and Knuckles. That's a good moment.
One other thing I want to mention, and this is back to like things that were jokes in the first 2 movies and in this movie that they pay off into an emotional moment, which is not something that you see a whole lot in kids' movie series. Is what is Agent Stone? The Agent Stone thing of him always being like a big fanboy for Eggman, and Eggman always shunning him away or like using him and then dropping him. Yeah. Like when he has his moment where he talks to Agent Stone through the screen or whatever, you're like, God damn it, they tricked me with these stupid jokes for 3 movies into actually caring about this guy's relationship with Eggman. Yeah. And it's sad to see them like have their final moment together. And it's just good. It's just good writing from that standpoint. So
any other moments? I want to bring a few other moments. I mean, I can't believe we got this far in the review and not talk about the dance sequence.
Oh, yes, thank you. I was going to bring this up with the Eggman.
Christ, man.
It's so good.
So funny.
Yeah, like, it's so good.
It goes on for way longer than it should, but it gets funnier because it's going exactly because it goes on so long. I think this movie does a really good job at differentiating its sequences. The heist sequence into the gun HQ or whatever is like it's solid like conceptually, but I think that the way that it pays off at the end in this in the dance sequence and then the room that has variable gravity, I think is actually like a really creative sequence. And I also like the part where they split up and then we get like introduced to a couple elements of character dynamics, like the friendship thing between Tails and Stone gets talked about there. Knuckles' fear of like the dark and Ghost gets explored there.
Oh yeah,
we get a little bit of obviously that's where Gerald is
There's
introduced.
no such thing as a friendly ghost.
Yeah. And so we get a little more Shadow there. We get Sonic empathizing with Shadow as he realizes where Shadow's pain has come from. Like that sequence where it's like they show up at this thing and they're like, and Eggman's like, all right, let's split up. And I'm like, okay, like this is going to be some doofy ass like comedic thing. But they actually use that splitting of the characters in a proper creative screenplay way to develop each of the characters in their own moments, which I was like impressed at as it was happening. Like, oh no, like you use this for a force of good.
yes. Post credit scenes, we get Amy in Metal Sonic. Our friend Joe was very excited when Amy showed up. Because I was leaning ahead, I was getting ready to leave, and he grabbed me when Amy pulled off her hood or whatever.
Funny, third time they've done this. Introduce the character before casting them and don't have them say a line in the last
Good
thing.
point.
Great bit. Though, I think probably Tails said something.
Tails does speak at the end of Sonic 1 because you're like, oh, it's the voice actress for Tails is who they're getting. But then I think they've learned that like, well, we can introduce the character, not have him say anything, and then celebrity stunt voice cast this thing down the road. Yeah. So
I also do want to praise the movie in one other area. If we haven't praised the movie enough, is this movie has actually like really good CGI, like genuinely very impressive CGI, especially on all the 4 non-human characters. I was consistently impressed by the like musculature on like their faces and the way they emote the eyes, and obviously the texture quality for the quills and the hair and all that stuff. Like there was just moments of like when Sonic and Knuckles are like feuding a little bit because Sonic is like going dark mode, and I'm looking at like Knuckles' eyes as he's like processing this moment, and he leans back and like allows Sonic to go away because he swore the oath to trust him, and Idris Elba's performance in the like, I don't know if it's facial capture, but whatever they did to make the CGI of the faces work, I'm like, this is good stuff.
yeah.
Which I do have to say, like, the CGI was good in the other ones, but there were certainly moments where like the interacting with the physical environments didn't really work, and I noticed a lot less of that in Sonic 3.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Yeah. I don't know if I have much else. Yeah, I think just super solid all the way around. Tucker, I'm gonna give Sonic the Hedgehog 3 a solid 7 out of 10.
I'm gonna say a 7.7 out of 10. I think this is a movie I can recommend. Like, seriously, and it's a movie that I would rewatch and think I would get more out of on a rewatch.
Yeah, like... Tucker, there was a moment towards the end of the movie where I was like, my girlfriend's brother is like 10 years old and he likes Sonic. I would go watch this with them again. Yeah. Which is not something I, rewind, Tucker, about 4 hours before I watched the movie. I was like, there's no way I would have thought, well, I'm probably gonna go watch Sonic 3 again.
Yeah.
But
good feat on everyone on the creative team. I think they've really blossomed into something that is like, I think this is probably the best video game movie.
Ever. I think I might put first. Lara Croft is always gonna be up there for me. Yeah. But like it's close. It's in the upper echelon for sure.
Yeah. And again, to close out this review, we have to stipulate neither of us like the first 2 movies at all.
I said I said that up top, that I find them to be annoying, bottom of the barrel kids entertainment stuff.
Yeah, and so all the praise here.
Kids in my theater were having a really good time with this.
Of course they were, because they were watching something sick as hell.
Yeah, dude.
They beat down the jaded film critics.
That's right. And this is just as a general theater going PSA spurned on. This is the end of the video anyway. It's just spurned on by something that I experienced. Hey, if you're going to go on your phone in the theater, first of all, don't do that. But if you're going to, turn down the fucking brightness on your phone. I swear to God, this can be cut from the video. I swear to God, there was a guy for basically the entire runtime of this movie, full brightness on his phone. Insane. Not trying to hide it. Up and in and out of the theater at the same time too, and full brightness on his phone as he's walking down the road. Not using it to like find his seat again, which you would remember where your seat was. Not even using it for that. Just like in his hand, next to it, holding it down by his pocket, putting it in his sweatshirt pocket. Full brightness on the phone the entire time. It drove me fucking up a wall.
People, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that if you're gonna
go
see Sonic. Yeah.